Guys, my name is Legnitto on IRC. I'm the new release driver for the security and stability releases. Firefox 364 came out recently. It was the first time we did a major backport feature from trunk to branch. I think there's some important things we should learn and talk about for future releases. So first, some disclaimers. We haven't done a full post-mortem. This is obviously a lightning talk, so I can't go too much in depth. And I actually don't have any suggestions to improve stuff I talk about here, so if you want to later get my suggestions, come talk to me. So this was the original plan for out-of-process plugins. Crashes are bad for users. Most crashes are caused by plugins. We have this cool new feature, out-of-process plugins, working on trunk. It's stable, and the code is actually fairly self-contained. We can backport it, and we can even pref it off on the branch. And so, hey, let's do that. Let's backport it. This was sort of the schedule we thought of. We were like, well, we can do some stuff to mitigate risk. Out-of-process plugin has baked on trunk. We kept on hearing. We did this new thing, the project grants Lorenz, to shake out any potential code issues backporting. We didn't do all plugins out of process. Only ones that we thought would give us most bang for our buck. And we were increasing our beta audience. We wanted to make a lot of noise and make people test this thing out and get more testing. And we thought with these mitigations, our standard release process will basically be enough. And the actual time and schedule didn't quite work out that way. The release took 3 months instead of what normally takes 1 month. We did 7 builds of Firefox 364, 8 if you count 366 shortly after. There are a lot of reasons for this, but what's interesting to note is not all were code related. So here's the high-level lessons I'm going to talk about. Number one, baking on trunk doesn't mean what we thought. So here's sort of some numbers about the different groups we have testing pre-release. So nightlies are fairly big, but they don't compare to our branch beta audience. And actually the group of users in these different audiences is entirely different. So we found that every time we increased or changed the audience, new issues popped up. There were just stuff we didn't see and testers didn't see. The issues actually weren't branch specific. It wasn't like this was fine on trunk and it was because of the backport to the branch. These were actual issues that were problems on trunk and would have been problems in the Firefox 4 beta or Firefox 4 final if we didn't catch it in the beta. So the takeaway I think is trunk is good for a rough base level of quality, but we have to be prepared that stuff can flare up, especially if there's externalities related to the changes. Another thing I think that was important and not very clear is supporting systems are really just as important as Firefox code. We use Socorro and crash stats to figure out if we're doing a good job, if the risk is worth it. And when we can't rely on that data for whatever reason, we don't feel confident enough to ship, or we don't have all the information to decide to ship. And I also want to point out that this point is not out-of-process plugin specific. They're potentially for other features that that could rely on other supporting systems, like changes to the add-on manager in Firefox 4 could rely on ammo changes. Next, we have third parties. They're important and potentially not as responsive as we need. So Firefox code could be 100% correct, but based on the way we interact with broken third-party code to users, it looks like Firefox is broken. In 364 specifically, certain issues required us to talk to third parties to get them to investigate. And it was hard, A, finding the right people to talk to, and B, the back and forth just took a lot longer than anticipated. We also expect them to pretty much drop everything they were doing because we were like, hey, we're going to release this, and probably a fair amount of your users use this, and we need to make sure that whether it's our problem or your problem. And they just really weren't as responsive as we expected. And I think a good takeaway is they have different priorities, and their priorities may not be ours. Project fatigue. So this release went 3 times past due, and people were just kind of getting sick of it. I saw a lot of people becoming reactive instead of proactive, and a lot of just ship it without going through the proper, is this bad? Is this stop release? What should we do about this? So finally, the biggest takeaway is changes affecting the web are very, very scary. Just affect only Firefox are different than changes that affect the way users interact with the web. So stuff that would be very, very, very scary to backport would be stuff like the HTML5 parser or user agent changes, WebM maybe a little bit. Stuff that wouldn't be nearly as scary and doesn't really affect the web as much would be big changes to Firefox, but not the actual web. And I think doing these sort of changes in major versions lets users downgrade if they need, even though we don't want them to, and makes them more aware that they're upgrading to something potentially incompatible. So that's basically it. Thank you guys.